Oh, being a Superman, I'm not really interested in religion. Well beyond that, I know my appearance is a bit shabby, but it's just what I do to fit in. If I was in a more traditionally upmarket area, I'd probably look and do it myself, and probably have a girlfriend. And this is where I am in the slums of the city. It's not too bad. I've made it nicer. It was a bit slummy, a bit druggy, a bit. I don't know. I think you send out good vibes and people respond a bit. So and people mostly keep to themselves around here. You get the odd one coming up to you, sort of. I don't use the word harassing, but it's sort of like asking you for smokes or drugs or whatever. It's really not appropriate to ask people that. But I know everyone's living in tough times, and that's how they get on in life, to communicate that way. I'm not one of those sort of streetwise, slummy sort of people that ask for other people for that kind of thing, favors in the street and stuff. I understand other people are like that. I'm not like that. I'm more like the Prince and the Pauper. I'm like the pauper in the Prince and the Pauper story. I'm the prince sort of dressed as a pauper, and mixing with the regular folk, and it's not being arrogant. It's just what it's like for me. I think someone's decided that at some point. This Prince and the Pauper story, and just to see what will happen. It's sort of like an experiment almost on me. But whether it's divine intervention or some person out there deciding this sort of thing, I don't think my family's interested in anything other than just regular life. Whereas I think I've been someone like Charles Dickens or someone at some point in life, or someone who writes fairy tales, and I've written all these stories, and they're sort of out there, sort of, don't like to use the word festering, out there sort of propagating into the world, sort of to design a sort of beautiful fairy tale at some point. It'll be some kind of happy ending at the end somewhere, where the heaven comes from the sky to greet me, or I greet heaven, or I disappear and come back a god, or something would be interesting sort of ending. I think ultimately for this world, God is sort of a bit like a princely looking Ken doll, but not a doll, not like a toy, but just like a really genuine sort of figure. Looks like a bit like Ken and Barbie. That's kind of the goddess and the god of human beings. In mythology, in the creation of certain stirrings of the world, God was more of a thunder, lightning being who created created the sky and the clouds. And I'm not into that sort of creation anymore. I might have been at one point. I'm more into just creating sort of like a more of a restorative sort of paradise, and creating sort of beautiful sort of stories, and I'm more of a filmmaker. I want to develop sort of a film style to the world that's you can easily dip off it. You can go off and go home and sit and just relax and not be part of it. But then when you get out and you want to join in, you can sort of naturally, your heart will sort of reach out to that sort of film experience, and you can sort of join in the excitement. A bit like go out to a party and just bang, you're into the mix. That's what I like. That's what I feel like I would like it to sort of be. And maybe when I go back to like the halls of justice, and I disappear and then wander off, just unassuming sort of Clark Kent or something again. That's how I'd like it to sort of become. I don't see anything wrong with journaling these ideas and sending them out there. I know people get upset and they say, "You're not Superman, you're not God, you're not this, you're not that." I think people are what they say they are. If someone says I'm a cactus, well, maybe they are in some way a cactus. If someone says, I'm a jar of jelly beans, well, maybe to someone else they're a fun guy, a fun person to be around. They're like a jar of jelly beans. Or maybe they want to be a jar of jelly beans and come to life and bounce around someone's kitchen. Maybe somewhere in life there'll be this massive event where everyone just becomes things they want to be. Like maybe someone just wants to know what it's like to be a chair and have some beautiful woman sit on him. Like He just wants to become a chair, and he's in a psych ward somewhere saying, I'm a chair, I'm a chair. And, he's dreaming of that. He's discovering what it's like to become a chair. But I think, you got to be kind to people. And the more you accept these things, the kinder you are to people, the better the experience. It doesn't have to be so grueling, I don't believe it has to be. If you're more in an accepting society, that chair will be more magical, be more alive and be more grandiose rather than just a crappy chair that looks like it's falling apart because it's been abused. So I don't think anyone wants to be an abused, assaulted, decrepit old chair. They want to be a beautiful, nice throne or a beautiful, nice chair in a park or something. And he's probably in a psych ward. He'll end up being a chair in a psych ward, and his soulmate, his wife will sit on him, hurt in a psych ward too or something. Get people out, get them mixing, no matter what they're saying, If they're violent, well, restrain them and just keep the public safe, but, don't condemn them, just give them another chance, And someone might want to be a laptop and have someone poke around on them with their fingers, They're saying, I'm a laptop, I'm a laptop. And they want to be a laptop, they want to be a computing power, that computes sums. They're practicing every day with their Rubik's Cube to get it right, But there's probably some dream they've had at some point. They want to be a calculator or a jar of salsa or, these are inanimate dreams, objects people want to become, Maybe that's true. Maybe that's what's happening, in society. A lot of people are crazy, sick motherfuckers, but really inside they're dreaming of something that's this seems impossible, so they're depressed, they're unhappy. But if you make these dreams possible in their hearts and minds, it'll be more of a beautiful, romantic, exciting experience. Like someone wants to be a candelabra and in Beauty and the Beast, and that they come to life as a candle holder. And what was the other object? A vase or whatever it was. I can't remember now. A violin or something. They want to become a magical singing sword in someone's hand, in a cartoon or something. Listen to these things and believe in them, and there's no harm. There's no harm because one day it'll happen or it won't. If it was meant to happen, it will happen. So that's what I always say. If things are meant to happen in life, they'll happen. But if we help accommodate other people instead of hating them and all the other bad things, it really helps the progress of life. Rather than decrepit decay of the world and the danger and the unsafety. I put on my princely voice because I'm talking as a prince now, but it's sort of camp and sort of tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. Inside of me is this prince wanting to communicate with you and tell you that, you don't have to be a fish in a pond, a fish in a bowl. You can reach out. These fish want to reach out, become someone's kids or something. They're learning about human beings. They're sitting in your house learning, what's all this stuff about? What's this camera here? They're dreaming it all of a sudden. They're going to become something better than a fish because that bowl there is not representative of who they are anymore. They're becoming more human, looking into the human space. Out in the ocean, there'll always be an ocean fish, but here in your bowl, if you make a nice environment, a happy environment, you'll have happy children if they ever come into your world. There might be the neighbours' kids. There might be, your neighbours. There might be, people in your world that come in and they just want to sit and look at all your stuff and enjoy. I might have been a fish once, someone's bowl, and might just be sitting here looking into everything, and that's why I spend so much time at home. There might be reasons, but it doesn't have to remain that way. Don't just class people as something and pigeonhole them if they want to be more than that. Try and accommodate and nurture and get them out blossoming. And I haven't even blossomed. I'm still a stone. I'm still sitting here a stone. I want someone to rub the good oil on me and turn me into a beautiful, handsome prince. And that the world would love that. You'll see that Ken blossom into a prince or whoever it is. I'm just saying Ken because it looks like that's probably what I look like in my best, because I was a little blonde boy, a tall, skinny blonde boy. I always felt attracted to that beautiful, shapely little Barbie with the little wiggly hips, and that soulmate I met, she was very much like that when I met her, and I clicked with her straight away. I loved her so much. Everything about her was just like my dream, the fact I wasn't well, very heartbreaking and shattered my world. knowing I might not spend time holding her hand and walking down the street proud. Everyone was just mocking me, saying, "Oh, you'll never see her," blah blah blah. "Oh, you're this and that and the other," But in my heart, I knew it was true. I just desired a beautiful hand to hold and walk down the street, gazing in someone's eyes. And these eyes, this girl, I could look in forever. I didn't have to look away. The the evil spirit or the sadness or the sickness that had got into me through that rave party, the damage that was done, was the only thing really preventing me from really truly pursuing that at the time. People grow up quick. A couple of years should have been an adult. So to me that didn't matter. I was willing to wait to marry her and just hold hands and just spend time doing all the nice things to get to know someone to that point where you can marry them. It's sort of courting. You can court anyone at any age as long as you respect their boundaries and marry them at the right age. It creates a beautiful world. When your world starts off as abuse, the world you're creating around you is abuse, and then the world you're propagating in your children and everything is abuse. You're propagating in your it's a cycle then of abuse that you what's the word? Propelling. I can't think of it. There's a word there. Progressing abuse. When your world starts out as romance and love and respect, that's what you're blossoming. That's what will come of it. That's what my world was growing up. I always respected the people in my world, my community. I never knew anyone was doing anything rotten or bad, really. A little bit on the surface, you'd see it come and go, but I never was privy to all that sort of environment, even though I knew it was around. There's probably people up the bush doing unspeakable things to people they've kidnapped, or it just goes hand in hand with those sort of areas and the old areas of bushrangers and Ned Kelly, and that's sort of where I grew up. We grew up on one of Ned Kelly's properties. There was even an old bush hut of his still on the property, slowly disintegrating, with an old bark hut, one of these ranger stations that had turned into a chook shed. By the time we left, it had collapsed, but we should have maintained it. We should have put an area around it. If we had had the foresight back then to investigate it, I know it was an old Ned Kelly station. He used to do the property never used to have fences, and they used to just walk with a horse and at certain distances to monitor the fence lines. He was one of those before and after being bushranger. So they did bushranging because they were dirt poor and they're desperate. So, so I think even though he shot police, he was just defending himself against other people, and those police were the sort of police that made him a bushranger. So that's why I think he's still alive. He's forgiven, and someone like that, and he's probably somewhere around. But I think, ultimately he was trying to protect his life with his armor, and it was just tough times, and I think he grew up just to digress, go off on a tangent. In the Kelly story, I know he grew up around Mansfield. Later on, he was sort of confronted by police around Glenrowan, which is further north. But he'd do a boundary around all the valley in Mansfield, up the hills, sort of not up in the mountains. No one went up there too much. Bitterly cold back then, a lot of snow. But yeah, his whole property outlay, if you looked from above, it was through Whitfield, through Barwhite, which is near Tolmy, down through Mansfield, all the way to Alexandra, across to Yea, and then all the way up to Shepparton, across to Benalla, and then back through Whitfield. That was his spread, Ned Kelly. And sort of up that way is Glenrowan, up near Wangaratta. So he sort of went up there and confronted by police and shot dead, I think, up near Glenrowan, I believe. In his boundary area, he was sort of safe, but leaving that, because that was all bushland once. It's been ripped down by farmers. It would have all been a bush spread, thick forest. But I would say those police would have wanted his property, and he would have just been defending it, and he would have really struggled to maintain it as a boundary rider. That would have been his job, and so he's resorted to looting and bushranging, and anyone who would come on his property, he'd rob them. And I'd say he's within his rights to do that, and the police haven't seen it that way and shot him. So really he's an innocent man, really. And the police would have been part of some kind of English sort of Australian English sort of not dictatorship, sort of, a ruling sort of almost like taxing people unfairly, taking from the poor too much, leaving them with nothing, that he'd be probably a bit like a Jesus, taking all their sheep and everything they have and leaving them in the street to die, by the Romans. So Ned Kelly would have been one of those kind of figures. And it's funny, I grew up there and I lived up on his property, and maybe it was me, maybe it was someone we knew, maybe it was just some of the neighbours. I have a pretty good idea. I know who he is. I won't give him away, but yeah, there's lots of those old families up there. I think the Nolans, a lot of them are painters. There's Lawson, Nolan, Lovick, all those old families, Wheeler, we're a bit too well to do. We've sort of come back spiritually to that area, because I think at some stage I was Banjo Patterson, and I used to ride up there on my horses. I sort of developed that Man from Snow River legend, I was a bit more of a county fair sort of guy rather than a bushranger or anything, but I was like the county fair performer, or as banjo, I used to do a lot of county fairs, They call it county fair too in Australia. Coming from America, I was sort of the one who coined that phrase. From America as one of the famous county fair performers over there too. So, in the early years, and then coming back to Australia really early on as banjo, I can't remember his first name. I know it so well as Banjo Patterson. What's his name? It's gone from my memory at the moment. But yeah, I was bush poet, performer, county fair performer. Played all my music on not a banjo. What are they called? Not a guitar. I can't think this morning. It's too tiring. But the story's there. I'll share it one day. But the story I want to share is the Jesus story, what happened there. And I know I've confused some people, but Jesus began as the name of God back a long time ago. I was a tinker man. I started out in that area around the Middle East a long time ago, coming from more Nordic areas up north, coming down through what's the area north of Jerusalem? It's tiring trying to remember back, and then sort of it's a battlefield there. So thinking back to that area, when my mind goes there, it gets rejected away because everyone's fighting. It's hard to think. Because memories are alive today. They're everywhere. So when you think, you go places, you know. So sometimes it's hard to remember. I know I've mentioned Banjo Patterson. There's probably a lot of people upset saying, you weren't Banjo Patterson. So it's hard to remember names when people are upset. So I've got the books. My sister's got the books. And I keep getting Les Patterson in my head. People probably think I'm like Les Patterson. Who's a made-up name. Les Patterson. He's a character. It was... not Michael. I can't think of Banjo's name right now. I'll think of it. It's blocked. I'll think of it later. The story of Jesus goes back a long way because the modern Jesus you know from the Bible wasn't. His name was not Jesus when he was born. That was imposed on him by the Romans. They pinned it over him, saying, "Look at you, you're a Jesus," you know, blah blah blah. It was an old name from the area, but it's not Hebrew. The name Jesus. Hebrew names are more like Mukhtar and Isaiah, and my name was Isaiah. And when I was crucified, they pinned the label on me on a piece of wood across my feet with J-E dash U, Jesu. There's no S in it. It's J-E dash U. It means the lamb, the slaughtered lamb. Whereas the name of God is Jesus. It's not Jehu. You know, it's sort of it's the name they give to shepherds when they torture them. So because shepherds slaughter the lambs, so so technically a Jesuit is sort of like from the area like a shepherd. So you know, so it's kind of a funny way of taking the name of God and turning it into something offensive. You know, so the real name Jesus is the name of God. A Jesu is like a traitor. You know. So putting J-U on his feet is like saying, you know, you're labelled as a slaughtered bit of meat. So the name of God of Jesus, Jesus, is like saying the Zeus, the God, Jesus, you know. That's how, you know, you start off as a god, as a Zeus, a lightning, a power, an entity of energy. So I came back, you know, after all that sort of period as just a tinker man, a medicine man. They weren't really medicines, they were just things to cheer you up, a bit like smelling salts and things, you know. They did help, but they wouldn't cure diseases. But back then, diseases weren't as furious. They were very gentle, like, probably the worst disease, I think, before all the other Black Plague, when all the other diseases spawned up, was probably tetanus. I think that was the worst disease we had back then, and there was no real cure for it. Your foot would fall off, you know. It caused a lot of leprosy, and leprosy is where you sort of get tetanus and it turns into an infection and it becomes infectious to other people. It spawns like bacteria that can catch on and you end up with flesh-eating bugs and things and limbs that drop off, and it sort of comes initially from tetanus, which is like a rust. It's a rust-borne bacteria from old metal and things in the ground you stand on and cut yourself, and it gets in your bloodstream, Because believe it or not, rust is actually a fungus or a mold. It's you can't really get rust unless you put something in the dirt. Like in your cupboard, if there's fine bits of dirt, if you keep everything spotlessly clean, it won't rust. Even if it gets wet. But if it gets in the dirt and the water gets in and the water softens it and lets that bacteria in, you'll get rust. And you can get rust in other things, not just metal. Like there's certain metals that are sort of like stainless steel, things like that, which are very well protected. They're folded many times to prevent, or they're produced to prevent that rust getting in. It's a form of mold, or it's like a mildew or a mold or a fungus. So you can get rust in your skin. You can catch it if it has that certain strain of bacteria in it that will catch into your bloodstream. So it's very, very careful. These days, not so bad. We've grown to a certain extent of natural ability to sort of and through the shots we get and all that stuff, they sort of work hard to sort of get rid of these diseases. The medical establishments, all the study they do, and I support all that. I just didn't like my experience of going through mental health. It turned me off a bit. Because I was misdiagnosed. It probably works for a lot of people, these medicines, but for me it didn't. So, a long time ago, I was this tinker man wandering around. My name is Jesus. That's where the name come from. And I spent a long time, and going back, I got to the end of that time, and I can't remember exactly offhand how it happened, but I ended up getting crucified at the end of that life. I was quite old, and it was one of the first crucifixions, and it was around that area, Jerusalem, around that area I got crucified, because they were doing them a long time before the modern Jesus crucifixions. They go back a long way, back to like sort of the monks around that area that used to just get around very solemnly. There's a scene in Monty Python where they're hitting the book on their foreheads. And they used to do things like that, punish themselves with straps and stuff. They walk around whipping themselves and doing this stuff. And those monks were the ones that dreamt up all this stuff, They're they're like the Aboriginals dreaming of whatever, all their spirits, they're like walking around with these, not hitting themselves with books, but they get, lumps of wood and smash them on their bodies, and, a bit like the monks in Tibet, the way they do all their torture on themselves, on their bodies and that. A lot of that self-inflicting on themselves, whereas these ones would do it praying at other people, and, And so I was caught up sort of getting crucified at some point for something I must have done. It wouldn't have been anything malicious because I was innocent. It would have been probably, I think, someone's taken a medicine, not got well. Something to do with that has happened, which has created this whole other thing later on, where I've tried to, help someone who may have been on their deathbed and then they passed away, and then I've said, yeah, I'll cure them, and maybe it hasn't happened, and so they've crucified me, So that's where that whole dream started off, of crucifying people in the name of Jesus, So so later on, I come back, and I'm a little boy, and I think in their belief system, they look for certain qualities, a bit like looking for a Dalai Lama, and you must understand, those countries, they reject a human being if they believe they're God, If I went there, they would fucking shit can me, Australia has a bit of humour, a bit of happiness, a bit. bit of open-mindedness about the thing. A lot of people don't, but most people will accept you, but just, keep away, mate, have a beer. I'm like that as well, I like to just joke about it too, because I don't take myself too seriously. But in those countries, if you walk down the street and you're a human being saying you're a god, you will get smashed. They will take you and flog you and rip you apart, because they believe God is a being, a immense power that a human being could not possibly possess, Their God is more of a Muslim God now, more of a Allah, one they pray to. It's not within them. They're nothing. They put their bodies down on the ground. They're low. So as soon as Jesus mentions he has the power at all of anything to help anyone heal or anything, because going back before that, when I was this other Jesus, and I mentioned, I can heal people with my tinctures, my medicines. As soon as a little boy I show any signs that I have these qualities, they took me and put me on a cross with my family. But I bent the nail and got off of it. I was a strong little boy. I was real strong. And because I did that, it sort of left me alone. But it's also a test of strength at a young age to see if you're could be a centurion. So I was taken for a long time, probably 5 years, which is a long time for a centurion. And I won battles. I did all sorts of stuff, as another name. They give you another name. My name was something like, I think it was Aurelius Maximus or something like that. I mean, ultimately they gave me the name Marcus, or Marcos or something. And none of the names are names. They're just like titles, like Marcus Aurelius Decimus Maximus means the mark of the best fighter or something like that, because I was strong. They marked me as the Maximus Decimus Meridian Aurelius, which means the ultimate fighter or something like that. So I was put in battle in Roman Colosseums and everything. I always won my battles, and then I'd sneak out to go and see my brother. I had a brother. And I'd come down in all these red robes, looking like, a warrior, sort of dressed down warrior, just in red robes, looking strong, nice muscles. And I'd come down, by horse. I'd meet my brother, who was a bit like a peasant, looking in all his white clothes, And at that point, no one knew we were different people. We were like twins. And so at certain points, we'd swap roles. I'd go away for a while, come back, and he'd come back as me, all tired. And they'd say, "Oh, look at you, what's wrong?" And I'd say, "Nothing, I'm all right." So my brother ended up dying at some point, and I went back to the village, and then, it got around that people thought, "Why are you so strong? Why are you so, mighty?" Because I've been feeding the village, food and being their saviour, sneaking food to my brother. And this is a secret no one's ever known. So, it's a big moment. I'll send to myself. It's a big moment, isn't it? In time that's gone already. No one knew I had a twin brother. But when they found out that something was going on, something secret, and I'd formed like this brotherhood. My brother had died, so I was like, brother, talking to people like they're my brother. And no one really knew I had a twin brother, so like, "Oh, yeah, you're my brother," So I'd walk around making up these sort of a family, because my parents were dead, and my mum was alive, but my dad had died. My mum was basically dead anyway. She was just worn out prostitute. As soon as Dad died, they all raped the women. So I talk about my father in heaven. He died and he was in heaven, and a lot of people believed in heaven. We didn't really understand it, but believed in it. But there, when they started getting around, there was some kind of son of God. Talked about my father in heaven, and my father, before he died, had professed that his son was this. Because he knew, my dad knew, no one else knew that there was two of us. He'd snuck my other brother away to another family. But I took on his identity. So I was walking around in his white robes, healing the sick, making people happy. When I got older, and eventually it cottoned on. There was something going on, and I got deceived by my best friends and my brotherhood, and basically they said, this guy thinks he's a son of God or something. So, and then they confronted me in the church, and, are you the son of God? And I said, well, if you say I am, I must be. So that's what caused the whole crucifixion, was the fact I'd sort of secretly deceived them, but in a way I'd saved all their lives, ferrying them food. Because all of them were starving in the streets, and they were getting healed by me. I was saving their lives, and there's no way regular old Jesus could have done that on his own, just by touching people. And that I was walking around giving people loaves of bread. I was multiplying them. I'd say, I can multiply the bread, and I'd come back with baskets and baskets of bread, and they go, how's he do this? How's he multiply the fishes? And I'd bring nets, and I'd catch all these fish and bring them in, and they're like, how's he do that? We just have line, we're just trying to catch it with our bare hands, and he can bring buckets of fish, and I'd bring them all down from Rome and all the big catchments further north, and they're all still trying to get in the Sea of Galilee with nothing in it, just about some, these ugly damn, they're like carp or something, So that's that story, how it happened. And after that, there was this sort of, when it got known that I had a twin, I deceived, the Roman Empire, and that's what caused it to crumble. Because the villagers rose up against it eventually and took it over. It was almost like any twins that had been born, they took them, so sort of my fault in a way, but really not, because I'm innocent again, because I never did that. It was someone else's decision to do that. But they take people's twins and use that as a weapon, and I think a lot of magicians actually have twins, They do tricks. One will walk and do something, another one's somewhere else, and they use that. They call it misdirection, where you think, oh, that's where they are, but really there's someone else doing that. Then they'll walk over and give you something. And that's how twins do magic, and that's probably what I did as a twin, with my brother. Probably doing water to wine. I probably walked in with wine, and they're like, what the hell, So, but yeah, I don't know where my brother is now or what happened. Being divided like that, being crucified. But as people wonder, how did you live two lives? It's like, well, I was two people for a long time. I was this Roman Emperor, Maxus Aurelius, and then I came back down. I was this carpenter's son again, and I'd swap spots with my brother, and no one knew that we were any the wiser. They didn't miss me in Rome. No one ever missed anyone there. You were just expected to be there, but when you weren't, it's like, oh, well, we still go on and do what we do. So, yeah, that's the story. And, you might think it's deceiving people or making up something, or but these are genuine memories I have of that time, and I was not telling a lie. I was actually, in essence, a son of God, because because Dad had sort of left and sort of become a god by then. So Dad really saved the world too, doing what he did by tricking the village. He saved all our people, and Dad really did the ultimate sacrifice, but he died on the cross. When I was a little boy, I got off the cross, but he was dead at the back. He died of grief, seeing us all on the cross. He'd given up the ghost. He was, on his deathbed anyway, really, in a way, working so hard, making all his furniture. And because we were put on crosses, one in front of the other. I couldn't see anyone. I had everyone else behind me. So I had all the strength. Everyone was looking at me, giving me their strength, and I got off the cross and saved my sisters, my mum, but I couldn't save Dad. He died at the back of grief, looking at us all on the cross, crying, and he thought we were all going to die. So he went to heaven not knowing if we'd survived, So it's very sad what happened to Dad, but he got to see me grow up to, I think I was probably 10 or something when all that happened. So but I was a big kid, so I used to help Dad with all the furniture and stuff. The chair, then I got taken away as a Roman, and they never really knew that I was the one down in town. I just disappeared. They never made the link, because I secretly would sneak off and change clothes and stuff. So, but it was all in good purpose. I was just trying to help the world. Back then, that was the world, basically. Trying to help them all survive. So, yeah. Peace out.